Welcome back to another episode of the AYM Show. This is the first episode of season 2. It marks a new beginning to something much deeper. It's not just a new season, but it's going to be a new standard in how I show up in my life, my faith, my business, and especially this show. And I really want to prioritize quality and knowledge that you guys can take and share my learnings across this journey called life. Lately, I've been really reflecting on how we move from one chapter to another chapter in our life. Maybe not just in our career or our routines that we go on a daily basis, but more so in identity. I think that there's this tension between letting go of once and who you once were to become the person God called you to be. And I think that there's sometimes this tension in between those two things. And if you're listening to this right now and you're stuck in between seasons, maybe you've outgrown your old way of thinking or your old habits, but you're not quite there to the next step. I just want you to know you're not alone. And I created this episode to kind of unpack on the things that I've been learning over the past couple of months, as well as things that I'm going to implement into the future. And to enter a new future, not just to survive and kind of crawl through the season, but to thrive in the next season that you're going to go through. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. In Ecclesiastes 3 verses 1, it says that there is a time for everything, a season for every activity under the heavens. Now, I think that Bible verse for me just represents whatever that I'm going through. It's a part of the journey in this long but short life that we get. And I often get reminded by the quote by the famous philosopher Marcus Aurelius that states, "This too shall pass." Now, that quote really resonates with me because when your life is going the way you want it to go, it's a reminder to stay humble and be grateful for the things that you have and not get too attached to the things that might be lost. But it's also a reminder when things are going bad that bad moment in time is never going to be there forever. And I think that those two, the verse and that quote, really encapsulate that idea of moving from season to season and experiencing those different things. I think that one of the most difficult things about entering a new season is shedding the person that you used to be, that you're no longer aligned to. And I think that sometimes growth feels like grief because in order to become the person that God calls you to become, you have to release or you have to destroy the person that you once were. I think that I used to carry a lot of labels, and I think everyone does. Business owner, content creator, hustler, and sometimes even potential was put out there, right? But I think that potential means nothing if you're stuck in patterns that keep you in an average place. And you have to understand that if you are doing things that you know you shouldn't be doing, it's going to take a lot longer to get to the place you want to get to. I think that we want God to bless our next chapter in life. I think we all do. But we still act like the main character in our last chapter, and we don't trust and lean on God's understanding enough to go to our next chapter. So I guess let me ask you this. It's who do you need to stop and what do you need to stop to become the person that God calls you to become? And maybe it's not because God is calling you to be something or become something new, but maybe it's becoming or returning to who God designed you to be. I think a lot of times when we grow, we have to remove in order to grow. And in John 15:2, it beautifully states, every branch that does not bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. Now, I think I can look back on my life, and almost every single time that I did not bear fruit that I wanted to bear, it was because I was doing or trying to do too many things at once. It could have been 5 businesses that I was trying to run, or it could have been doing a bunch of diets inconsistently. But whatever it might have been, I was spreading my focus among so many different things that I couldn't focus on one thing fully, and it didn't allow for myself to grow because I was spread thin among a bunch of different things. And in John 15:2, it really beautifully says that if you want to grow and it doesn't bear fruit, you can prune that. So when you prune a tree, you cut off the branches of the tree. And likewise, in life, you can cut off habits. You can cut off businesses. I know that at the peak, I had 3 businesses at once. And I know none of them succeeded. And I know why. It's because I couldn't focus on 3 different things. I mean, yes, there's a point in time where you can have multiple businesses. But when you're starting out, it's hard to focus and stretch your focus thin. And it's so much easier to just focus on one thing. So what I recommend you doing is take a moment, 15 minutes even a week, just to write down, or I like doing this in my notes app, and I can record my audio. You can write down or talk whatever suits your needs. You can write down your mindset. You can write down your relationships, your habits. And something that I like doing is I split it into like 3 or 4 categories. Like I said, mindset, relationship, finances, habits, and then habits that I know I shouldn't be doing that I am still doing. And when you write it down, in the act of writing or speaking it out allows your brain to tackle one at a time. So when you prune things, pruning is not killing the tree, it's trimming the tree. And I like to think of that with habits too. So a lot of times you're like, oh, I have to go on a hard reset. And that might work for some people, but it might not work for others. So you can just prune one habit a week. For example, okay, I'm not going to spend more than 4 hours on my phone today or this week. That's one prune. And the next week I say, okay, I'm not going to watch Netflix as much. That's another prune. And you can build up those habits until you get to the place that you know that you could have been to. And it didn't feel like you were stressing over it, and it wasn't all at once, making you overwhelmed and less confident about what you were doing. And you can get more stuff done because you're more focused. I think the other insight that I would say is just pray over your problems, pray over your habits, and just release the old identity that used to be, and allow yourself to have the grace and understand that everyone goes through trials, everyone goes through hardship, and those trials, those hardships are meant to build you into the person that you can become. I think when we navigate uncertainty and the quote unquote in between, when we're from one season to another, I like to think of this one phrase. I don't know if it's a famous phrase or not, but it's the hallway between the doors. It's like the space where one season ended, but the next one hasn't began yet. And it's kind of uncomfortable. It's kind of awkward. You kind of start doubting the process. You doubt your pace. You doubt your peace. And you even can start doubting God in some circumstances. But over time, I think I've learned that faith that works only when things are clear, or things are clear to you, is not faith. That's comfort. Because faith isn't always going to be comfortable in the now, right? If I were to want to go do a marathon with no training, it's going to be super hard. But if I start training towards it, it's going to become easier. And it's kind of similar. Faith, if you can see the destination, all the time, then what is faith? Faith, you can't see faith, but faith is something that you put into God to lead your life into a positive direction. And if you only put faith when things are going good or when things are going clearly, then that's not faith, because you have to put faith in God when things are going hard and when you're going through hardships and when you're going through those struggles, because that's when your faith is going to be tested the most, and that's when you grow the most. If you are not sharpening yourself and if you're not going through hardship, you can't get stronger, you can't grow. I love the idea of making a sword in an iron. Like, you have to be able to push through the discomfort and the pain to get to the place that you want to get to. And in James 1, verse 2 through 4, it says, "Consider it a pure joy when you face trials, because testing produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may mature and complete, not lacking anything." I think that is the most beautiful way to put this that I'm trying to explain. Consider it a joy to face and go through hardship. Some people don't get to, right? It's a blessing to feel hungry. It's a blessing to have discomfort in your life. And if you're in that space of that in between, like those hallway doors, just keep walking. Just keep taking action. Just keep moving. The worst thing that you can do is stay still and doubt. The longer you stay in between in that corridor, the longer it's going to take, the more you're going to doubt, and the more you're going to second guess everything that happens. I like to remember, and I like to remind myself oftentimes, that God is never late. He's waiting, and he's going to build your character while you're waiting for clarity. And he's going to build you on his timing, not yours. Oftentimes I find myself complaining or thinking that I should be a lot further along in some areas of my life. But then I come back to thinking that maybe that's God's protection from me from doing something that I know I shouldn't be doing, or maybe it's something that I can't see that would happen that would affect my life dramatically, and he's protecting me from that. There's an ancient quote, that another one by Marcus Aurelius, that says, "The obstacle is the way." And that kind of also like encapsulates this in a nice way, which is, oftentimes in life, the harder way is the way to go, and the easier way is the worst way to go. There's another quote that's like, the path to hell feels like heaven, but the path to heaven feels like hell. And it's like, whenever you want to do something and it's the harder way, it's most likely the best benefit for you. If it's like painful now, but it's going to be better in the future. I like to think of that often, and I like to live by that, by getting things done quickly. So I have a pet peeve of having a dirty place, a dirty space, and I like getting that done right away. And if I don't get that done, I do kind of get irritated about it. And that irritation makes me strive and get through it so that I can have a clean space. And I also have to learn how to be a little bit less irritated and frustrated about those small things that don't really matter in life. But the idea of doing the thing that maybe you don't really want to do, but you know you should do, is probably the best thing that you can do in that moment right now. Some actionable steps is, don't wait for your peace or don't wait for comfort to move forward. Start acting on and start moving. God will meet you after you start moving. He's not going to meet you and he's not going to give you all the answers right away. He'll give you golden nuggets and he'll give you little knowledge things. And you'll be like, oh, and you'll open doors. It'll feel effortless. Something about this podcast that I love is it doesn't feel like I'm struggling or it doesn't feel like I'm forcing something. And it's amazing how much progression that I get through that. And in that sense, I'm continuing to do that because it doesn't feel like I'm pushing and I'm not getting something in return. It feels more effortless because I'm doing it with God and for God, not just with or for, but both. And it's not like I'm doing it without him, which I did in the past with a bunch of businesses, which turned out to be not fruitful. I think another important aspect about these new seasons is when you want to become a man or a woman of God and the person that he called you to be, it's very important to remember that there's a version that God already has of you. The strong, disciplined, honorable, servant-hearted. But the question is, are you ready to kill the quote unquote old or counterfeit version of yourself to become that version? Are you ready to do that? Being a man or a woman of God does not mean preaching on platform. It doesn't mean doing this podcast. It doesn't mean doing YouTube or getting fame, followers, clicks. It doesn't mean any of that. It means starting with private integrity, knowing that you are doing the right thing when no one is watching. And I truly believe that. Oftentimes, a lot of people wear a fake mask, a facade to look better out in front of other people. I'm guilty of it, and I think most people are guilty of trying to look better in front of people than what they would do in private. And I always remember that God calls us to be authentic and God calls us to be ourselves, and to be a carbon copy of someone else and to copy someone else to try to be conformed by this world is not something that you really want to do, because we're all made in the image of God and we all have our own beauty and capability. So why would we try to do something that isn't ourselves to try to fit into someone else's agenda or idea of what is right? Psalms 119:9 says, "How can a young man keep his way pure? By living according to your word." And in 1 Corinthians 16:13, it says, "Be watchful, stand firm in your faith, act like men, be strong." I've always had to confront my distractions, addiction to validation, my inability to sit still in this very modern and fast-paced world. And it's really, really easy for someone to say God first until it's about deleting that app that you know you should be deleting, or quitting that habit that you know you should be quitting, or waking up early to create time to seek him in the morning before you go to work and before you chase or consume content, for example. And I think some things that I like to ask myself is, when no one is watching, do I honor God with my thoughts and actions? And do I feel like I'm being authentic? Am I lying to myself about what I'm doing? And another thing is, would the man I want to become be happy about the decisions that I'm making right now? If I start acting like the person that I want to become before I become that person, then in 5 or 10 years, I'm already used to the things that I'm doing, and I'm probably going to get there a lot quicker. Some actionable steps that I recommend is building a spiritual discipline every week. Like I said, with the pruning, you can remove things and you can also add things. A lot of times, a lot of people remove a super hard habit. Let's say it's alcohol or something. And just removing it can feel like a loss if it's a big part of your life. So you can replace that habit with a good habit. And that could be like a version of, instead of pruning, you're kind of replacing. I don't know how I would say it in a nature standpoint, but it works pretty well. So I'll just include it here. Um, it can be anything from morning scripture, which I've taken immensely amazing journey on this year. It can be fasting. It can be digital Sabbath. It can be no phone for the morning. It can be many different things that you can choose to build a spiritual discipline. And what I'd recommend is I would just start one that you know you can do, that isn't super overwhelming, and then kind of build on top of that. For example, like I think it was 2 weeks ago, I cut my screen time from around 4 hours to like 2, and that's like a complete half cut of my screen time. And being able to do that, one, it shows you can, and everyone can. I know people who have really bad screen times. I'm talking to you. You can cut your screen time, and you don't have to spend a lot of time on your phone. I get it. There's a lot of different reasons why you're on your phone. But most of the time, you don't really need to be on your phone that much. You can cut it, and you have the ability to. It is tough. You have to replace it with something else. I like replacing it with audiobooks. I know that's technically a screen, but it doesn't really count as screen time. So I don't count it. But you get the point. You have to replace that habit that you're doing with something else so that you can kind of move forward with it. And I think another one is don't wait to be ready and start acting as if you're the person that you want to become. Because if you wait until you're ready, there's no perfect time in this world. You're just going to be waiting forever. And honestly, have fun. If you want to wait, you're never going to find the perfect time. And some people wait their whole lives waiting for the right opportunity to come in their lap, when in reality, the perfect time to start is right now with the things that you have at your hand. When we build businesses, I guess kind of want to move to a different section that was kind of very, very like cut off. But I kind of want to move to talking about business and building a business with God, not just for Him, when we're moving through seasons and when we're trying to find what we want to do with our lives. I used to ask God to bless my plans in life, but now I'm switching to more of like, I ask Him to reveal His plans for my life. And that's been a very recent change. But I believe in the world of business, especially, we idolize strategy, followers, income. But I think it really means nothing if we don't have Christ as the foundation of everything that we do and have a strong foundation of what we do. All the businesses, all the podcasts, everything that I run, they're not just a brand. They're assignments. They're assignments given to me by God that I'm going to try to fulfill. In Colossians 3:23, it says, "Whatever you do, do it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." This one Bible verse has the ability to completely transform the way you look at business. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord. Now, a lot of times when I ran a business when I was a lot younger, I just did it for money. I'm going to be straight up. I just wanted to be rich, and I still do want to be rich, but it's a different perspective, right? And being able to admit that now is, I guess, just because I've gotten older and I've realized these different things. But in Colossians 3:23, it really showcases you have to do that work with all your heart, and you have to put in full effort, and you have to do it for God. You don't have to do it for humans. Humans are always going to disappoint you, and people are always going to disappoint you. So commit to the Lord, and whatever you do, do it for Him with a full heart. Another verse that really encapsulates this well is Proverbs 16:3, and it says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans." I don't know what else I can add to that. It's so true. I've committed this whole journey of this podcast to the Lord, and He's blessed me with so many amazing guests. I love each and every one of you who've been able to share your perspectives, and you've been all amazing. I still talk to some of you every once in a while. And it's just beautiful to see how much change and how much further you can get when you incorporate and include God into your work. And it's so much more beautiful. So something that I would probably leave with you is whenever you do work, treat your work as a ministry. So I like to treat this as a form of ministry in some sense. But for example, let's say you're doing email work or you're doing administrative work. Treat it as ministry. Design, you can treat it as ministry. The meetings that you do, you can start with prayer. You can do ministry. There's different things that you can find in your day-to-day life with business and treat it as your ministry. I think an actionable step that I like focusing on or incorporating, I'm going to be quite frank, I don't do this every week, and I put it in my notes, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. It says to add one project or system that you can submit to God in weekend prayer. And I try my best to do this, but how can you add that one system? How can you add that one project that you just give fully to God and just say, God, I can't do it alone. I need your help. I need your guidance. I need your support, and just give it to Him. And I promise the abundance of support, the abundance of, it just feels like everything's perfect. It'll just come flooding out. And I think another thing that you can do, I learned this from Practicing the Way, a book by, I forget his name. I'm going to put it on the screen so that people can go find it, or in the description. It's an amazing book. If you want to go read it, go read it. It's very good. It's to schedule a Sabbath every single week and to rest. Even if it's like an hour, just rest. Sit in your own thoughts. Maybe take a nap. Rest is obedience. Jesus rested. You should rest too. You shouldn't work yourself out of exhaustion. A famous quote by Seneca says, "He who is not slave to God will be slave to men." When we move through life and through seasons, oftentimes you want to surpass what you did in the last season of your life. You want to raise the standard. You want to keep going. You want to move past what you did before. And I think it's very important to understand that your life will always reflect the standards that you tolerate. The standards that you tolerate is the life you're going to live. And the habits that you have created the life that you have now. So if you want to have a different life, you have to do different habits to get a different life. A lot of people hope to rise to the occasion, but I think over time I've learned that men and women of God rise to their routine. In Romans 12:2, it says, "Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And in 1 Timothy 4:12, it says, "Set an example for believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." If you want this next season in life to be different, I guarantee you it cannot be the same as the last one if you do the same things. Did that make sense? I don't know. I don't remember what I just said. I have bad memory sometimes. You can't be the same if you want a different season in your life than the previous one. So personally, I'm setting new standards. I'm going to talk less. You want to be listening more. You want to be planning less. You want to be more obeying God's word more. You want to be reacting less on a off of a whim, and maybe you're going to take more reflection time. But if you want to have a new standard, if you want to have a different season and you want that season to be better, you cannot be the same person. You can't do the same things, because if you do the same things, how can you expect to have a different outcome? I think when you're going through this, it's hard to kind of find what works, finding what's the best way to go about it. And I found that the two easiest things that I like doing is reevaluating your morning and evening routine. Are those routines aligned with where you're going? I think a lot of people in the self-improvement space are so adamant about you have to have this 5 or 10 step morning routine or you're not going to become successful or whatever it might be. But I would argue that the night routine is a lot more important, because if I go to bed at 2 and my morning routine has me waking up at 5, even if I do all those things, I'm probably not going to feel the best. And if I plan my day out the night before, which I highly recommend, you get a lot more done. You have a lot more time. You have a lot more less stress. And I think that evening routine can really change the trajectory of your whole day, the whole next day. And another one is creating a non-negotiable list and then sticking to that non-negotiable list for at least 30 days. I don't know why I put 60, because I'm a bit crazy, but I sometimes don't even put a non-negotiable list. I do 3 tasks that I have to get done in a day. And everyone's like, 3, that's not a lot. That's the point. If you overwhelm yourself with 10 different tasks that are big, you're just going to get burnt out, or you're just going to not produce the same amount of and the quality of work that you could if you put in less but meaningful hours. I like to think of the 1 hour of deep work is equivalent to 8 hours of shallow work by Matt Gray. And it's a really amazing way to put it. I think oftentimes when we're in work culture, everyone's like, oh, I worked 8 hours today. How many hours did you work? And you're like, I worked 4 hours. But those 4 hours were deep, uninterrupted 4 hours of focused work, where those 8 hours were talking to coworkers and being in and out of shallow work, not being able to focus, having 10 different tabs open. You can see kind of how one person probably gets more done than the other, maybe in half the time. Yeah, it's interesting to see, and I would recommend you trying just to kind of remove distractions as much as you can in an area, in a space, and just maybe focus for 1 hour or 2 hours. Apologies for that notification. But yeah, just in general, I think that would be a really good way to go. And oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay. So I guess overall, that's the wrap up of season 2. Not the wrap up, the beginning of season 2. It's not just really a show. I like to think of it kind of more of a journey of who I'm becoming, of who you all are becoming. And I hope that I can provide a light. I can provide some relatability, some insight into leading a good life, into becoming closer to God, more rooted, more intentional, more led by God and less by fear and I don't know what the word I was going to say. But one Bible verse that really aligns with this is Philippians 3:13 through 14. It says, forgetting what is behind and straining forward what is ahead, I press towards the goal. Let this podcast episode be your invitation to raise your standard, to show up, to build a life God called you to be and called you to become, not just in theory, not in just your dreams or your imagination, but in action. If this episode in any way spoke to you, share it to a friend, post it online, support it in any way you like, and most importantly, live it to the fullest. Live to glorify God every single day live to inspire, to love, to help others. And just know that I'm always rooting for you. If you have any questions, always reach out. I love each and every one of you. And I'll see you guys, I think, next week. I think I'm going to start doing these podcasts weekly again. So thank you guys, everyone, for watching this whole episode. And I'll see you guys next time.